Hello, welcome everybody. Welcome inside the Astro studio, a peek behind the scene of the work of the astrologers we love to learn from. I'm your host, Sarah El-Harrar, Astro Auntie, and today I'm talking to Cameron Allen, who is an astrologer, a herbalist, an energy worker, a poet, and a lot of things. Like the list is really long. There's co-founder of Memphis Black Healers Collective. He's a board member of ISAR. He is a board member of Fit Organics. And you were just telling me you're also like a yoga teacher, Kundalini certified. Like, tell me all the things.
Yeah, for sure. So I got my 200 hours in Kundalini yoga. I didn't start teaching because something about it, like especially in the climate that we're in, didn't feel like it was satisfying enough. And Kundalini yoga is pretty activating, and a lot of people actually don't need that. And that's something I intuitively felt. So I went to Ayurveda school. And
Yeah,
so now I'm like in my third year of Ayurveda school, and now I'm like getting it a little more. And then I'm in a certification called Budokan Yoga, which is an infusion of primal movement, jujitsu movements, and then yoga all infused together. And it
that's
has like this
beautiful.
portion that's called mind science too. So it's like all together. And I just got done like 3 months ago with my level one Unani Tib medicine certification,
Cameron.
and and I have like two other movement teachers. And so like because every year, I always every year I update my definition of holistic. And so it's
Yeah.
like in
I mean,
you're like
yeah,
in
if it's going to be holistic, it's just ever expensive. Is that right?
exactly. And so in like looking in the old text, there weren't any like movements. There wasn't mobility specifically for medical astrology, especially in the text that I was privy to, right? There's like more stuff coming out now, and I'm getting deeper into Unani Tib, and there's things kind of already in there like that. And Jyotish and Ayur Jyotish, like I'm in two classes for that too right now. So I'm just like keep going. And so yeah, and then I just got a mentor for hijama, which is cupping.
Oh my
And so I'm
God.
just
Yeah,
yeah, so
never
I'm just
stopping.
integrating.
What do you have in Sagittarius, ninth house? Like, what's going on there? Like, what's the ever
Yeah,
learning, ever going
yeah,
thing?
yeah. Sagittarius rising.
Oh, yeah, there it
Yeah.
is. What's your big three, Cameron?
Yeah, so Sagittarius rising, my sun is in Aquarius conjunct the North Node, and then my moon is Gemini.
Oh, there.
Yeah.
Okay, it writes itself. It's like the joke that writes itself. Beautiful.
Yeah,
Well, thank you
exactly.
so much for being here. And I'm really happy you're here. We never got to have these conversations because you and I have been around one another in like more professional or educational settings, you know.
Yeah.
But I never got to pick your brains. But every time that I'm around you, like I get a glimpse at the madness, and I can tell that even through a glimpse that there's just like such a rich world behind it. And it's such like it's so cool to work with you when I see the stuff that you bring to the table as a ISAR board member. Yeah, it's really cool. So I'm really glad that you're here. Yeah, so thank you. First things
Yeah,
first.
and I'm glad to be here. And I wish I could. Actually, I need to like have a drop in conversation that's like not just professional with like everybody. It's like
Right.
feels yeah, which is
Yeah.
something we want to build more of the community feeling of it all.
Right, because it is a community and it's very beautiful. Like we all know each other and stuff. And I really appreciate your work. I took some classes of yours at the conferences at Norwalk and at ISAR. And yeah, it's always like really beautiful stuff that you share. So I want to start from the beginning. Can you tell me a little bit who you were before astrology? Like, where do you come from? Where did you grow up? How did this
Yeah,
happen?
yeah. So I'm from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and growing up there, kind of in an urban environment. Yeah, it had nothing to do with anything that I'm doing right now, for sure. And then around about age like 10, 11, I moved to Memphis, Tennessee because my dad's job transferred him. And yeah, I lived in Memphis. And then around like high school, I started playing football. And I started getting my act together really because like when I was younger, I kind of like had anger issues, kind of wanted to be like, like the culture that I was around and the environment kind of like made me want to be more like hood and like more like a thuggish, you know? And so like that's kind of like how I was like leaning in that direction pretty strong. And so then when I started playing football, like I had to start getting my grades together because I realized like, wait, what am I going to do after high school? Like I can't like go to like thug training school. Like I couldn't like, you know, it's like, okay, what am I going to do with this? You know? So I started playing football my sophomore year, summer of my sophomore year, going into my junior year. And like, maybe I had like maybe like a 2.1 or something like that. My GPA was really low. And then I just like made a decision. And from that year, not only did I start playing football, but I also like grew like 3 or 4 inches within a summer. So like I like got really tall, and then I like thinned out, and it was like I've always been like a really hard worker. And so by the end of my senior year, like I like got a scholarship to go play college football, which was like really amazing.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So then you go to college. Where did you go to college?
Yeah, first I went to a HBCU in Missouri called Lincoln University. For those that don't know, HBCU is a historically Black college, and so I was there for a year, and then I got like my coach was like really good about getting us opportunities. So then I got another scholarship somewhere that was even better after that year, and so I went in the middle of nowhere, Oklahoma. The interesting thing about that is because it was like in the panhandle of Oklahoma. If anybody knows Oklahoma, it's like I was like, so there's like the middle of nowhere, and then I was like in the epicenter of the middle of the nowhere, right? It was like really bizarre. But looking back on it now, it's the only place in all of the United States I have like a main astrocartography line. My moon line went through there.
And you have no other lines through the states?
No, not like
No.
the main lines, no, like planetary lines, just the
No.
moon right there in the middle of nowhere, Oklahoma, where I happened. I just randomly went to college there.
That's so strange. Wow. Cool
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah,
And so
yeah.
then, okay, so then you're in football. How do you meet like the world of like, I guess you entered through medicine, like sports medicine, is that right?
Yeah, health and sports science and psychology is what I was doing in college, and in the psychology degree, I did start Carl Jung, like in alchemy, in the planets. Like that was like kind of my introduction, lightweight, but that was way before astrology was even like on my mind. And so I would do like a lot of papers on Carl Jung because I was like fascinated with his perspective on things compared to all the other stuff that I just didn't really, I guess I could say resonate. I don't really like that word necessarily, but it's like I didn't really feel what they were talking about with psychology, but I was trying to figure myself out. Like all other students were like taking abnormal psychology and they want to be psychologists, and I was like, what the hell is going on with me and all this anger and I didn't necessarily want to go to college, but it made sense. And I have a body and I have a mind, and I'm going to carry these things with me the rest of my life. So health and sports science and psychology that only makes sense to me.
Hmm.
And then it was after college, I was working at a level 4 lockdown facility for like troubled youth, and I started having some really interesting experiences there because just being around people who have trauma, I started like becoming attuned to my own sensitivities around like energy or like feeling people or noticing people or being able to penetrate into like the core of like people's essence. And so I had to go explore. And the thing that made me explore the most was there was this one time we had to like walk around and make sure all the kids were like sleeping because there was like a lot of trouble that could happen if we weren't paying attention, like really close attention. And one day this kid got up and he was just like, you could see like it was like he was not there and something else was there. And so I walk into the room and I was like, what the heck is going on? And then something just like activated in me, and I just like put my hand out and I like spoke these words, and then I saw spirit leave the child. And from that day forward, I was like, what the hell is reality? I have no clue I had no clue what's going on in reality. And then I started going around the city in Memphis and just trying to find a teacher or trying to find answers. And I started exploring it. And that was like what took me on the path to begin with. And that's when I met my first teacher. Her name is Norma de Jesus. And she's so many things. She's so many things. But that was my first teacher that I met. So that's and that got me closer towards astrology, but we're still not even there yet, honestly.
Wow. So you like had like a literal spiritual experience out of this world, completely out of context, and then you started
Yeah,
seeking answers, right?
yeah,
So in
yeah,
some way,
yeah,
that's like
exactly.
the moment, the inception moment.
Yes, 100%. Yeah. And then like maybe there was like within like 3 months, I was like doing these like group circles at my teacher's shop, and it would be like me, and then it'll be like somebody who does like visionary art, and then somebody who does psychic readings, and then my teacher does like all these like different like plant medicine ceremonies, and then it's like all these people who do us. And I'm like, one day I just stopped and I asked, I was like, hey, like I don't even, I guess people call it imposter syndrome. Maybe that's what it was. I didn't really experience it that way, but I was just like, I don't understand why I'm here with y'all. Like y'all all do these things, and like I just work at a facility for youth, and it was so bizarre to me. And then 2 months after that, we had this cacao ceremony where my teacher did what they call a despacho, and I remember my intentions were to remove all the blockages from like the way the material world is like stopping me from like actually reaching like what is like higher for me in my life. And after that, 3 days later, I get fired from my job, and then like a little bit right after that, I start working in a spiritual supply store.
Wow. Did you look back to the date? Did you look back to the transit? I mean, do you know what was transiting transits?
I don't recall actually. I remember I did do that at one point, but I'm always just like keeping it moving.
Yeah, you
So
don't, you're
yeah,
not
but I
curious.
need to.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you
I mean, I was, but I feel like I like looked at it and it wasn't like something I wrote down or I like
my instinct
held on to.
immediately is to ask you what's the date? Immediately,
Yeah,
you know?
I'm gonna
But
have to. I'm gonna have to find it and figure
no,
that out.
I get
Yeah.
it. Like the urge to, like I have the urge to make sense, but you're like, no, let's keep it moving. Let's look forward. I love that. Um, so hold up. So you get fired. And so did you have the sense at that time to be like, oh, that was meant to be completely when you got fired from the job?
Yes, kind of, because when I got fired, I was like, I don't know. I kind of maybe I thought something might be wrong with me because I literally didn't care, right? But also it was like a very difficult, stressful environment. So like, oh no, I got fired from a place where I was being attacked multiple times a week, where I was trying to take care of children. It's like it was fine, and I had this sense of peace about it. And I didn't even think about that intention that I had made just a few days before, right? Because sometimes I feel like, especially spiritual people, we're like sometimes very immature in this way of being able to actually track things. We're like, I want this thing, and then 2 weeks later, like something happens, and we're like, oh, what's going on? I feel confused. It's like, well, you just asked for it. Like
Yeah.
you literally just asked for it. It's like so. So I just moved forward, and then a few days later, yeah, I got this call in the spiritual supply store, which I actually had already applied to because I was going into that store and I guess I was helping people, and they were like, "Hey, like, do you want to work here? Like, every time you come in the store, like, people are like you're helping people naturally." And so I had already applied to the store. The way I applied, I like went in one day and they were like, "Do you want to apply?" And I was like, "Yeah." And then a few months passed by and I came back again and they were like, "Oh, are you here for the interview?" And I was like, "Nah." And they were like, "Well, you never applied." And I was like, "No, I didn't." I was like, "I'll bring back my stuff like tomorrow or whatever." So I go home and I just sit down and I just write. I don't give them a resume. I don't give them I just sit down and just write about myself, like 3 to 4 pages, and I just turned it into them. And then 2 days later, they called me and were like, "Hey, we want to do an interview." I came in. We were in the little herb room that would end up becoming like my space, basically, unbeknownst to me. We have like a 25-minute conversation, and then he calls me the next day and is just like, "Hey, you want to come in and work?" And I was like, "Give me a few weeks." And then I started working there, and that's when I started becoming an herbalist, and then the herbs would end up taking me to the planets, and then that would start infusing together to help the people. So yeah, it's pretty.
It's
Yeah,
crazy. It's like literally the path drew itself in front of you. There was
yeah,
very little choice, it looks like, or a
yeah,
conscious
yeah,
choice of anything, just following.
for sure, for sure. There was nothing to even think about. Like the things that were happening felt so bizarre to me that they actually became the only thing that was rational, which is like a very interesting thing because it's not something I was like actually like formulating in my mind. But it was like, oh my gosh, this is so crazy. It has to be the truth. It has to be real. Like there's nothing to think about here because and also my mind was already like, I don't know what life is now. Like I thought life was like this and like this and like that. And all that just got like destroyed. So like this has to be something that's true happening right now. And so I just followed it. And I didn't even think about it. I wasn't even considering things. It was like I was a baby, just moment, 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 and just being present with it. So it was really bizarre, interesting
That's
situation.
amazing. So who's your first astrology teacher? Like when did you take it seriously? When did you like dip your more than a toe? Because I get it like that, okay, you're dipping toes here and there like right now,
Yeah,
but
yeah, yeah,
not the
yeah.
way you are now.
Yeah, right, right. I would say the first form of astrology that I really went into deeply, I would say medical astrology. Yeah. But even then, I would have to really say it was evolutionary astrology on some level. Yeah, because that's the one when I really like felt it. The medical astrology was more just like in combination with my herbal practice. So it was like I was an herbalist and I was starting to learn little stuff about astrology. And then I started learning evolutionary astrology and more medical astrology. And then sooner or later, like astrology started taking over and becoming like predominant. So I would say evolutionary astrology. So through the Jeffrey Wolf Green lineage, Mark Jones.
Mm-hmm.
That was the first like actual course that I took on astrology. And I was getting bits and pieces from my evolutionary herbalism teacher, Sage Popham, and then also from Judith Hill, which was also his teacher.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I was getting stuff from them, and then Mark Jones, and then there was a bunch of other people in evolutionary astrology that I was kind of like tapping into. But I was like really gun ho on evolutionary astrology because it was something I could feel, and it was something I could work with the people that I was working with. It's like other forms of astrology, they just weren't relatable to like the experiences myself and the people around me were having. But when we talk about the soul or we talk about people's emotional identity and what they're actually experiencing, nothing could beat that because I started like just doing like kind of mock readings like at the Panera Bread, and soon, like very soon, like in exchange for sandwiches, literally,
No way.
and very soon I realized like I have to like find a different space for this because it's like eating sandwiches at Panera Bread and going straight to Pluto and Uranus. It's just like
Yeah, it's a little
it was like
intense.
it was very intense. And yeah, it was really intense. And it was a beautiful, and it was good because most of the people I was working with were just like, I would be like, okay, I'll do this for you because you're a single mom and you don't know what's going on right now. It's like that's mostly like African American single moms were like the people I was working with because I was working so much. I didn't actually have that much time to do readings, but those would be the people I'd be like, my heart would just like open, and then it would just be like this, okay, like we're gonna do this thing, right? And there's like no question about it. It just was again like this very like moment instinctual thing. The truth was just the truth. There was no need to think about it. And yeah, that's how it all started.
So you were giving like readings to people that would come in the store, or you would meet them at Panera? Like, wait,
Yeah, the people that they would come into the store and I start working with them like herbally.
yeah, and then
And
do
then and
in-person
then
readings and like so
yeah, so
in
it'd be
exchange for
yeah,
dinner, you don't have like, okay, let's eat a sandwich
yeah.
together and I'll look at your chart.
Right. Because I'm broke, you're broke. So it's like, what are we about to do? It's like I still needed an energy exchange. That's something I understood like inherently inside of myself. The value that I bring just
Mm-hmm.
from being a psychologist, being able to like
Of
hold
course.
space for people. All these things. I was like, this has value to it. Just me showing up and talking to somebody has value, really, at the end of the day. And so I would try to go to either like a Panera or a restaurant, but sometimes we would go to the park too because there's some people. I did start working like a little bit with movement because back then I also was working at like a gym too. So it was
So,
yeah.
wow. Okay. So, what are your readings like today? So, I can imagine, I mean, maybe you still do Panera Bread readings sometimes, would you? No,
No,
no more
no.
Panera. You like
No.
gluten
Well,
free.
well, at least I would just say like not evolutionary astrology, like because like a lot of people in Memphis, especially so in Memphis, like there's a difference between my practice in Memphis and my practice like online with the world, like my like I would even call it like my professional showing face versus my community showing face, right?
So your
And so
practice
those two
in
things are different.
Memphis is like the Black community mostly. Is that what you're saying?
It's
The
it's
Black
it's more
Healers
into
Collective?
it's more integrated now, and also like my readings in Memphis very rarely stick to just astrology because I'm more actually known in Memphis. Like in Memphis, if somebody came in Memphis and was like, the astrologer Cameron, they're like, you talking about the herbalist? You
Hmm.
talking about the guy who does a bunch of different things, right? There'll be like the juju guy in the back of the herb store, or they'll be like the guy who works with the crystals, or like the energy, like all those things is like more what I'm known for actually on the ground in Memphis.
Hmm.
And so most of my readings will be like nowadays, they're a combination of I will use your astrology as a tool. And then we'll talk about movement. We'll talk about your diet. We'll talk about relationships. We'll talk about all these different areas of life and how can you get to where you want to be. So it like astrology is more a tool when I work with
Hmm.
people in Memphis, where it's like maybe like the main dish we could say when I'm like online and working with people, at least to begin with. But more and more, like people are coming to me for way more than just that, and mostly like overall holistic health in general.
Yeah, just the Cameron special, like all of these things, all of the
Yeah.
things that you know brought into a session. And so I get that. So you think that the term healer, is that something like you resonate with? I know you don't resonate with resonate, but
Yeah.
do you like it? Like healer, does that feel like all encompassing or I personally.
Yeah. That works. And also, I've learned through my Gemini moon in the seventh house. It's like I honestly, I'm like, what do you like? How am I relating to you? And like, that's what I would prefer you call me, right?
Hmm.
And like, my identity is like very strong in. There's times where when I'm being an astrologer, I'm actually a mathematician.
Hmm.
And there's other times when I'm being an astrologer where I'm putting the astrology down and I'm like opening my heart and like we're connecting with your ancestors or your guides. There's
Hmm.
other times where I'm just like, okay, like here's a surgery date, right? It's like, so there's like all these different hats that I wear. So it's like, I am a healer using astrology sometimes. I am an astrologer using healing modalities sometimes. I am a yoga practitioner who's looking at the chart sometimes. I am an herbalist who's looking at the chart. I'm an astrologer who's looking at herbalism. That's the way that I relate to it myself, like internally. And at any moment in time, the truth will be the truth. And I try to keep the space open so that I can become the part of me that I need to be in the present moment in the way that is true.
Wow. It's really deep when you put it this way, because it is like this thing of like holistic, ever expensive. So now it includes Ayurveda, and then
Mhm.
it's like all of the things that you cannot unknow. So when
Exactly.
you're in relationship with people, you try to best serve them using everything that you know. Is that right?
Absolutely.
So it will depend according to need mostly, or do you feel like
Mhm.
people pick and choose on a menu? Like, how does it work with your
Yep.
clients?
Right. Yeah. So most of the time, my general consultations will be like a natal chart reading, and that will be an infusion of traditional astrology and then evolutionary astrology most of the time. Unless there's something coming up in the chart, of course, that says like, oh, okay, like health is an issue here, and then that would just be brought in automatically because that's a part of the reading.
Hmm.
And then other people are coming to me specifically for holistic health and astrology readings. I have another offering that's like an astro herbal specifically. And with the astro herbal one, I'll like look at the chart and I like assess the constitution. And then I do like my holistic evaluation tools. If it's in person, I'll check the pulse and do some other stuff. If it's online, maybe I'll check the tongue as well to like confirm or deny the calculations of the temperament and stuff like that. And then I'll give like a a lot of times the way I like to describe things is in environments. So like let's say somebody like has a lot of dryness in their chart, not enough water. right? I'll connect the fact that, hey, like I'll talk to people about the environment that they grew up in, so they can understand like, oh, like what was the mood, or like what was the relationship you had in the environment. So I'm in California right now, so it's hot and dry most of the time here, right? And then I talk to them about their parents. Were their parents moist? Were they cold? Were they dry? Were they hot? And then I'll just like start to show them like, hey, you've literally, most people, they have, we in this society we live in, it's a dry society, I find, you know? And so a lot of times like, I'll be like, hey, like notice how this environment externally in the ecosystem was just like the like the ecosystem of your relationship with your mom or your dad, and then like how that like builds on things, and it's like, oh, and now you got dry skin, and so now we need to bring in oil, and that's my Ayurvedic mind, right? We need to bring in oils, and also on an emotional psychological level, oils in from the perspective of Ayurveda is called sneha, and the word sneha means to oil yourself, but what it also means is affection. And
Mm.
affection brings in moisture, because moisture brings in connection and that like feeling nature.
Mm-hmm.
And how can you bring that more into your life? How many baths do you take a week? What oils are you ingesting? What oils are you on your skin and internally? And beginning then asking people, what kind of food do you eat? And is it oily or not oily? Do you like to cuddle? Right? All these things. And people really just are like, okay, like that just makes sense. Like, and it
Mm.
can wipe out a lot of ways in which they're like, I have this problem and this, and they say to do this for this problem or do that for this problem, and I'm like, listen, like we need to stop being told what to think and learn how to think, so that we can be present and like and figure out solutions in a way that's organic, and also in a way in which, if you start to understand this process that I'm trying to reflect to you, in 20 years you will not forget this. There will not be some new herb that comes out that's better than this herb that I just told you about. It was, you will still need affection. You will still need oils. This will still be something that is like, it's timeless in some way, shape, or form. Or if it's not timeless, we could say it's adaptable to any circumstance or situation, because it's about the attribute or quality of an experience or of reality. And this could be made very linear logical. This could be made emotional. This could be made spiritual. And so really getting people to understand like very fundamental concepts like that, one, it deconditions them, and oftentimes is very helpful in removing the judgment, which is oftentimes the thing that's actually holding them back, but it also allows them to explore. And so anyway, that's just like a reflection of kind of how I think about it sometimes.
Wow. So wait, hold up. Tell me something. So my mind is a little blown right now, so I have to digest what you just said about the oils, because it so when you look at the natal chart, you can see constitution that would indicate this type of terrain or this type of story or narrative.
Absolutely.
And so then let's say, okay, so this is my question. Let's
Mm-hmm.
say you are living a life that has no affection. You know, some people, you know, it's difficult for them to find to be in situations where they would get affection. Would you then like send them towards an oily, like Ayurvedic treatment that could replicate or not replicate, but mediate maybe? Um,
Yeah, replicate is a great word there. Yeah,
yeah.
because it would be, yeah, because the affection, the experience of receiving affection from somebody makes you feel warm and moist. Mm, like soup. You know, and people's just like, oh, I just want some chicken soup. It's like that experience is the same experience as cuddling, but it's different. Yeah, but like it's the same attribute. And also, it's so important to understand that, because in this space and time, like when people are like, oh, we need to co regulate and stuff like that, it's like that is still a very, I don't know, I would call it a very Western way of thinking about it, even though it's good, it's getting better, we're going in the right direction there. But it's like, you can hug a tree. You can also, what you can also do is, when was the last time you laid on the ground and you just experienced the feeling of support on the ground? And like, can you like be on the ground and like basically taking people through like a process of, Lay on the ground, and now I want you to start doing these certain types of movements so that you can feel in your body what it feels like to be supported. The sensation of support can begin to allow you to translate that to the feeling, emotion of support, the psychology of understanding what it means to be supported, even if you haven't had these experiences. Because if you haven't had these experiences, we need to give you a taste of it. So it's like, do you feel the seat beneath you right now?
Mhm.
And like, there's so many times throughout the day that you are not acknowledging that you are supported. And that is not to minimize anything that you've experienced, but we it would be intelligent, it would behoove us to like actually learn what it means to be supported. How often do you get into a squat position? Because that position is a position of stability. And so, can you build the intelligence through your physical form of what stability and support is? And then we can move to the emotions. Because if there's nobody around, this is not an option. Like, I wish that for you, but everybody doesn't have that as an option. And so there has to be other solutions, right? And then taking it on a spiritual level, it's like you have ancestors. And sometimes the response that I immediately receive from people is, I don't have a good relationship with my family or my ancestors because of the things that happen in their dynamics in the tradition I come from. But I'm very, very young in this tradition. Yeah. But when we say ancestors, we don't mean people who have the same blood as you who have passed over. What we mean is those who have been elevated that have passed away. It's not just family members, it's the people from your line who were the wisdom keepers and the ones that are like holding the space for the lineage moving forward. And so some people, the context needs to be, are you connecting with them? Because if you're not connecting with them, then from our perspective, it would only make sense if you can't connect to yourself. Because identity is not I in the sense that we think about it. Identity is the environment that I am in, the blood that courses through my veins. All these things are identity. And sometimes we start to, oh, me, I have these problems, I have these issues. And I'm like, dear one, you don't even know that you have support behind you and you're carrying on your shoulders issues as if I'm me, but the issues are we. And so it makes sense why you don't feel supported because you're carrying the we issues as if they're just me issues. And that's heavy.
Mhm.
Right. So these different perspectives, it depend again. That's why I was like, I have to open my heart. And it's like, what is appropriate in this moment? Because those are two very different perspectives, even though I can infuse them together in a way that's like very smooth and cohesive, depending on what's being presented in the present moment.
Mhm. Wow, it's like what the words that came to mind was like existential remediation in a way, because it
Beautiful.
feels like you're addressing like literally existential, like the bottom line of it when you're talking about,
Absolutely.
like tenderness or feeling supported. Like I think like these are
Mhm.
very
Yeah.
broad, needs for everyone.
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and that you're taking like your remediation, really you're using all of these tools. And so can you yeah, give me an example, like in the chart of like something that you would feel like, okay, this would need, like, okay, let's talk about oil. I love the oil thing because I come from a culture that's very effective and very oily and very olive oil ridden. Like
Hmm.
all the food is drenched.
Yeah.
We literally eat olive oil as a snack, like
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
with
I
bread.
love it.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But
Yeah. Yeah.
so I do relate to the idea of like oiliness being. So what would that look like in astrology? Like, what am I looking at?
Yeah. So we can say, we can think about the temperaments, or let's just use the zodiac sign so I don't have to teach about temperaments for the
Yeah.
moment. Yeah. So it's like, let's say somebody has Capricorn rising
Mhm.
and they have, and let's, so for people to know, Capricorn is a cold and dry sign
Mhm.
ruled by a cold and dry planet, which is Saturn. So let's say we have Capricorn rising, we have Saturn on the ascendant. The immediate environment was cold and dry,
Mhm.
right? And so it's like, how can I teach someone the essence of creating? or generating warmth in the essence of creating moisture or generating it themselves through their diet, through the way that they think, right? Because oftentimes, somebody with a Capricorn rising, like they can have a tendency to have this like more rigid way of thinking about things or the rigid way of being in the world. And rigidity is not warming. Rigidity is not moist. And so how can we just start to bring in maybe like compassion, care in a certain type of way in which it's more moist, right? Because even the way that Capricorns care, they're like, well, I told you to do the thing. I gave you the instructions, right? It's like, okay, like next time you do that, like just go put your hand on their shoulder when you tell them that, right? Or just like, how do you create more of that in your reality? It could be so simple, right? Again, soups would be really nice there. But that's an example. It would be like something that's like Saturn strong. So if somebody has Saturn in the first house, that would like automatically be like one thing that I'll be like, hey, like maybe you want to be mindful of the cold and dryness, either that you're putting out or that you're experiencing, depending on the configuration of it.
Wow, that's really fascinating. So, I mean, a lot of the classes that I took from you were medical astrology. And I think that I took two classes, one on malefics and
Oh
one
yeah.
on debilitation. So it's like almost like how do you deal with that? And so I loved that common thread between, I don't remember what other class, but those really marked me. Um,
Mhm.
and so when you teach a lot of medical astrology, right?
Yeah, I do. I do. And because like in the beginning, I was like, oh, I gotta like have a niche kind of, it's like I gotta like
Mm.
kind of show up in this certain type of way or whatever. So yeah, medical astrology, or like even the way I put it is like holistic health and astrology, because the word like medical is kind of has been heavy for people, and they're like, well, I'm not a doctor, so I can't like, where they feel scared or afraid to enter into medical astrology. And that's also something, the reason why I went and got my level 1 Unani Tib certification, for people who don't know, is Greco-Arabic medicine. And that is the medical in medical astrology.
Mm-hmm.
But we just don't acknowledge that. It's like we acknowledge there's something called the temperament. Sometimes we acknowledge there's something called the humors, but we're like using that like one concept out of a whole system of medicine called Unani Tib or Greco-Arabic medicine. And then we're just like, so we're just taking temperament and we're putting it with medical astrology, but then there's a whole system of medicine that we're leaving out and just not acknowledging at all. So I'm like, I got to go back and get that, because that was why I had to call it holistic health and astrology, because we were using the biomedical modern medicine model for astrology when that just wasn't the origin point of it. So
Mm-hmm.
even sometimes when we like look at the correspondences in astrology, right? So if we say Jupiter rules the liver, the way that we think about the liver is like this specific organ in the body, and it does this, this, and that, and it's like, and that's not even what the liver means when we talk about Jupiter. It talks about the digestive virtue, right? The ability to digest and process. It's like a system, even more than it's just the specific organ system. So the way we've done medical astrology has been it's been modulated in a certain type of way. Let's say that. I don't know if I answered the question you just. Yeah,
I
medical astrology. Yes, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and wait, so do you think that it's dangerous? I don't know about that word, but do you think that it's like not great for people who don't have other modalities of health to study medical astrology? Like, could it be maybe like a dangerous tool put in some hands? Like, I've
I
always
think that
felt
if
like, oh, it could be dangerous. Question mark? I don't know. Tell me.
yes, it could be dangerous, and like not to be like kind of anyway. Like I think anything could be dangerous in the wrong hands, right? A knife can be used to like cut bread. It could be used to cut somebody. So we always want to be mindful with things like that. And I find that everybody I've heard speak about medical astrology as teachers, they always do a great job in being like, hey, like you need to know these things to be able to practice confidently. And so like I don't feel off about it really, unless people are learning it on their own and they also don't even like understand basic anatomy physiology. I don't care what system of anatomy physiology you understand through, right? Because sometimes I've even had people talk to me about things like from a very biomedical perspective, and they're like, oh, you don't know what that illness is? And I'm like, Yeah, it's hot and dry. That's what it's like. It's hot and dry, and it's in this organ. Like, yeah, I know exactly what that is. And they're like, no, but and they give me like the name of it. And
Right.
so like me personally, I acknowledge every medicine system in from based off of like my understanding of it, and I like respect what that system is. But also sometimes I have to respect what that system isn't as well.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so whatever model people use, they definitely need to know some type of anatomy and physiology, but also they need to know how to say I don't know. They also need a resource list, right? It's like if somebody has a psychiatric issue, then it's like you need to know how to refer that person out. If somebody has cancer and you only work with like flus, then you need to know how to send that person out. If somebody only has 1 week of time for a surgery date and you only work with people who you get to only you do it when you get to pick a really good one and you're afraid because this 1 week everything looks bad, then you need to send that person out. You need to have a resource list. Like all those things is like more important than that's more important than anything else because a lot of times with the Western mind, we want to grasp and understand everything or feel like we're like competent in a certain type of way that actually leads us to being very incompetent because of the lack of being able to say, I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I would say about that.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's the perfect answer. It's like to know what you don't know and to know that asserting what you don't know can be so dangerous, especially when working with
Exactly.
people.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. So that's really amazing. I think those are really good tips. And so I think we covered a lot of like what a reading from you would typically include. Would you say like is that basically what you do? Or he's like, no, sit down. I also
I mean, because we didn't even talk about the traditional astrology stuff, right? So it's like the layers of, like
wow.
how I'm like looking at a chart, checking part of fortune, the part of spirit, and maybe even, with people in Memphis, a lot of times people, because my partner also does like healing work, and so sometimes we do like collaborations and sometimes people want to know their gifts. And, there's someone who's been like really prominent for me in my work the last like year and a half. His name is Ali Alomi, and he's
Yeah.
bringing out these like different calculations. And so like now it's like I have the ability to calculate what it might be somebody's gifts through the astrology, but then also being able to like help them with like different practice from the yogic traditions or rituals from like my other like teachings or learnings really in the tradition that I'm learning in too as well. And so that could be another component from a traditional perspective, which would be more like we could say ritualistic, magical, which is not something that I really even talk about much. But I appreciate you for being who you are, for that being able to come through so clean in this present moment. And then also the traditional perspective of just reading the basic natal chart and then going to Fidadia and then going to Profections and then going to Solar Returns. And then how that gives like different layers of understanding and like, do you want to move in the next year? Let's figure out when you need to move. So now let's go do all these layers of the chart, and then we can look at the monthly revolution, and then we can look at the monthly perfection, and then we can look at the transit, and then we can like really dial it in. And all of this being like held in this way in which that person doesn't need to know that like I'm doing all this like very complicated stuff, and I kind of just am I am leading them to guide me to like what are you actually looking for, instead of being like I'm this guy with the magic ball and I'm just going to tell you when you should or shouldn't do something, right? Because most of the time people are like, yeah, like I'm thinking around like September to December, and I'm like, it's October. Like in my mind, I'm like, it's October already. Yes. But they're like giving me this space, and I'm like, oh, beautiful. Like, and then we kind of like figure it out together, right? Where it feels like
Mhm.
more generative. It feels more like, I guess we like people like to say like it'd be more empowering for the person rather than me saying, because sometimes like I run into the issue of saying something being accurate and correct, and then people relying on me in this way that
Yeah.
isn't true.
Intimidator. Right.
Yeah, like it becomes not true, right? And which is interesting because there's some people who are like, "Oh, you were right and accurate," and I'm gonna come back to you, and it feels just clean, normal. And then other people do it, and I'm like, "This doesn't. No, this isn't true. Like this doesn't feel good." And I think that's something too. Like as astrologers, I think people overemphasize like free will, and people overemphasize fate, and there's not like this like relationship between the two, and like being in your body and in your heart, and even like developing your intuition to be able to know what's true in a present moment beyond my ideas or what I think about things. And so I'm always trying to be in dynamic relationship with all those things. Yeah, and it makes it beautiful because I feel like I don't have my hand on the wheel, but I cultivate a lot of skills to be present. So whatever can come through is needed.
Wow. Do you rely a lot on like, do you have like a questionnaire for them? Do you ask questions? Do they come to you as a problem, or do you rely on like the moment, your intuition, or what comes up for you? Like, how do you, because that's a lot of skills to bring in like an hour session, let's say, you know? So
Right.
how do
Yeah,
you
yeah.
kind of like trim and pick and choose what's relevant for your clients?
100%. The first layer is depending on what type of session they choose, right? They choose a holistic health astrology. I know I'm coming with all the healing modalities and stuff like that. If they choose a general consultation, then they're going to say like what they're looking for. And then I can just gear based off of that. And some people do. It is just more mathematical and very like logical and just a conversation, and it's really chill. And other people are like, I had this experience when I was 12 years old and I'm still trying to move through it. And that would be more like evolutionary astrology, right? And so like I'll use a foundational tool. I'll start with a foundational tool, and then as things progress in the conversation, sometimes it goes in different directions. But that's usually how it goes for the most part. Like somebody will say what they're looking for, and I'll choose the appropriate tool that will work for that, and I kind of stick with it. But other things will just be brought in here and there. So that's usually how it shows up. Yeah, especially like online. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Do you feel like there's like a special type of person that's attracted to you? Do you have like periods where you have like the same types of clients? I had like this whole year of plutonic people, which was like really funny. My students, everybody in my readings, it was like Pluto conjunctions everywhere. And it was a long time where I felt like, okay, but does something like this happen to you where you're seeing
Yeah.
trends in your clients where people like looking for something at some moment that you're like, you can, you know what I mean? Like see a
Yeah,
trend.
absolutely. Yeah. My trends have had a tendency to be more like demographics, which has been really interesting, right? Like
Hmm.
it was like single black mothers in Memphis, Tennessee. Like that was like my demographic for a
The
while, right? And
Panera,
then
the Panera
say
girl,
again.
the Panera
Oh
girl.
yeah. Right. There was a lot of that there for a long time. And then it became like for a while it was like there was this really bizarre moment of time where it was like for 3 months it was like everybody was from like Africa. And then it was like a 2 month period where like I get like a lot of readings from Asia, and then I had like an Australia period, and it was like this weird, like there was like these little times where that happens, and then there's also I was working on a program from this company called the Foot Collective where they teach you how to like work on the hips and the knees from the feet up, yeah. And so there's this process we go from the feet up, and we work on the body, and there was this time period where I was like wow, like I feel like there was like a month and a half period where almost everybody was over 55. And it was during this time I was like learning how to help people with the process from the feet up, and that was a really interesting time too as well. So there's been different times where things have been a certain type of way. Um, but the biggest trend that I have as far as like my clientele is nobody knows what's going on with me, and I haven't gotten a diagnosis that feels true, and I feel like I'm at my wit's end. So I rolled the dice and got a reading with you. That's it's like I'm on my last leg, like help me understand this, like, and that's like the main thing that I feel like, yeah, like that's been the most continuity throughout my practice, like people seeking to understand like why is this happening, and those usually the most interesting readings. Yeah.
when it's like a kind of a medical astrology need, like they have something that
Yeah,
they need your eyes on, and where you can offer them a perspective that they haven't gotten from elsewhere. Wow, that's
yeah, absolutely.
beautiful. And so, like I get you give off, or you have this aura, that feels very centered. And I know that you have like a lot of practices and movement and yoga and meditation. You lead meditations
Mhm.
on different platforms. And so I can really feel that there's like a spiritual component to your work for you, that it's part of like your spiritual way of being, right? So I don't know
Absolutely.
about like, so tell me where astrology fits in that, or if like how you make sense of that in your practice and what it brings to it.
Yeah, for sure. So, and you're saying specifically in my practice, like how astrology fits into my practice. Is that what I'm hearing you ask? Because I want to
Yeah.
make sure I answer this question. Okay, cool, cool. Yeah. So, I mean, when I first started working with astrology too, there was these like specific experiences that I had where like the glyphs of the planets came through me. And so a lot of times, like I would just like write out the glyphs and then just like do meditations on them and let them kind of like give me their like sigil juice, I guess we call it, and then also and then I also would work with double terminated quartz, and I would just like put the double terminated quartz right here on the Anya chakra, and I would point them towards the planets, and I would just like get the translation of light, right? That's like an aspect we call it in astrology, the translation of light. But it's like, when have you actually translated light with the planets instead of reading these books and thinking that you know something, you know? It's a very different experience that can open us up to like astrology having this meaning that is like the mathematical form of it as passed down through the tradition, or like say a certain tradition, but also like I have Mali blood in me. And so like the Dogon tribe, right? They, or like people in Mali, they knew Sirius B was there without these like instruments. And so I think that I do that. I think that I have like that Malian blood in me, and like how we just like connect to the stars directly, or the people of the stars come to us in our dreams and teach us things. But then I also have this like more scientific, mathematical, linear way of like calculating things, which is something that I developed later, to be honest. But both of those things feel like really amazing and yummy and beautiful to me. And then again, like I was saying, I'm in Jyotish now, and so also doing the mantra practices, which I've been doing the mantra practices for a while, especially working with the eclipses. I was doing that for a while based off some of my yoga teachers like inviting me into those practices. So those are a few ways I bring it into my life, and just like kind of like, yeah, just gazing upon the planets and getting a lot of insight from there, because when it comes to looking at my chart, I just can get a little heady, and I don't like existing in that space for myself personally. I like to rely more on my intuition and instinct as far as like my day to day like behavior, because there is also a potential that we can go beyond what we think the interpretation of the chart is. Like there is a possibility there for that, and that's something that I hold dynamically. I hold that very dynamic, right? Like it's like, okay, like this is what the astrology is saying, and then also I have all these practices. My ancestors are guiding me. So how is this going to show up? What's the truth?
Mm-hmm. I saw something on Instagram. It was this guru, I don't remember his name, that was saying that in Jyotish astrology, that the person who practices yoga and who meditates is kind of like out of their astrology. That practice transcends astrology. And there's actually a similar thought in Kabbalistic astrology, that there is a saying that the people who follow the book have no stars. So people have interpreted it to be like, don't do astrology. But really, what I
Mhm.
understand of it is that there is practice that is so I mean, one of my words right now is rigid. Like I think when people are really like strict with their practice, that nothing can happen outside of that, right? or that
Yeah,
you
for sure.
can you transcend the transits? I don't know. What do you think?
No, I don't
No.
think you can. And based off of my beliefs, let's say, maybe, it's like, why should you? Yeah. It's like, are you here or not for a reason? Why would you want to transcend the reason that you came here to exist? It doesn't make sense. It's a very um interesting way of trying to think about things. It's a very like, I want to control the world or have this like sense of like odd power. It's not powerful to me to like transcend your experience here, because you're here for a reason, right? Your ancestors wouldn't have brought you here. Your celestial guides wouldn't have brought you here just to transcend. And if you were here to transcend, it would be in the chart. So
Right.
it still would be the astrology, right? It's like more like the way I think about the transcending of certain things, and obviously too in Jyotish and in Ayurveda, there's different levels of karma, right? So there's like different layers of it. It's like there's some that's like, do this mantra, oh, that's out the way. Be more intelligent, read 5 books, that's out the way, right? And then there's other things that's like, okay, like there's a lot more work to be done here if you want to like remove this from your potential experience, right? So there's also a more dynamic way of thinking about it, in which is not just like this or that, but it's like, here's a spectrum of karma. This one's more sticky and heavy. This one you can go to the beach and do 3 rituals and it'll go away, right? So it's like it's more dynamic, and I think that's the way I approach it that way. It's because it is a relationship. Everything's interconnected, and it's a relationship, and I don't take those. I think people say that in this like very light way, where it's like everything's interconnected, and it's like I'm like, no, everything's interconnected. And how am I connected to this, and how am I connected to that? Like, I have to actually have that relationship. I can't use it as just a floating idea out there. I need to taste it. I need to smell it. I need to see it. I need to experience it. I want to be with it. I want to know it, because it's the same way with everything in life. Like, you know, 2 people will plant rosemary plant, and one person can take care of it in a place in which it seems like it can't grow. And another person, it dies every time where it grows native. And it's like, it's about relationship and understanding the soil that you're in, and the season that you're in, and all these things matter. And like, that's the way I approach reality in and of itself. And so, yeah, sometimes I do think there's like this like interesting, maybe fine line between spirituality, intuition, astrology, being mathematical, blah, blah, blah. But I also think that people have put them over here and over here when they actually like belong together side by side.
Hmm.
So
Yeah, a lot of things in astrology in the end is it's a story of side by side, of this and that. Like there's no, it's always contradictory and complementary, and you always have the yes and but this, right? So I feel
exactly.
like this is really where we all have to be when we
Yeah.
deal with
Yeah.
astrology. Like it's this limit, like it's a
Right,
thin
right, right, right.
line.
Yeah. And we always can like be mindful of telling people that there is a curriculum still, right? Like I've gone to I have to give a shout out to Michael A. Bryan, because he does like he has cultivated the skill in his students of like learning to memorize things, like literally learning the skill of memory, right? Or like I wasn't in any of the classes where, but I'm pretty sure, if I'm not mistaken, he also helps people. We could loosely say develop some intuition in some way, shape, or form. And so, and he's a very like type of person too. At the same time, right? But
Method.
he has the yeah, exactly. But he has this way of like, this is the curriculum, and all these things can belong together. But I still need you to be able to differentiate. Like, I need you to be able to read a chart, and also it's wise to be intuitive. And he does lean more towards like reading the chart first. And for me, I'm like, come as you are, and then we cultivate the skills that are on top of or layer onto the truth of you. And that is the way for now, right? And, when I'm should I say, anyway, when I'm build out this like kind of like school, there will be like classes on like body work, and then astrology, and then aromatherapy, and then intuition, and then perfections and transits and Fedaria and calculations and astronomy and so all those things just belong together. It's just like, how are they going to coalesce in one's experience in a way where all these things are present and they can be differentiated.
Mhm. Yeah, that makes me think about, okay, so we're not supposed to talk about it. So you're starting a school, hopefully, fingers crossed.
I mean, it's
Not
like, I
talking
mean,
about.
I'm just working in the backgrounds of it because me and my partner have been doing more work together and stuff like that. And I've also, yeah, and also I've done, yeah, I'm working on stuff in the background for sure. I can talk about it. I just don't have it fully formulated, but I'm more than open to discussing it with you if you have a question for sure.
Yeah, because I'm thinking about this like in terms of impact, because you're doing like such different things together. Like how does that like synthesize, and like what is the impact of your work that you wish to, to share with your students? Like what is the thing? Yeah, tell me.
Yeah, absolutely. Are you an astrologer and like this is where it blossomed forth from, I would say. Are you an astrologer and do you feel like you can't synthesize the information that you have? And do you get anxious about potential transits in the year? And if that is happening, it's probably because you're not in your body. And it's probably because you don't feel safe because you don't actually have a relationship. You have an idea. And you might be intelligent and you might have good information, but until that like synthesizes into your like actual essence and being, then it can create problems for you. And it also can create disconnection with people. And it's about relationship. And for people who are aromatherapists, do you want to learn some astrology? How can I give you a gateway to bridge your aromatherapy and not give you Fedaria and perfection and all these things? And how can it still work in an integral manner? So there's different ways of being in astrology with astrology, and those are all about relationships. And so the school would basically be like connecting all those things together. And it's like, and how many people really know like what part of the lunar cycle to start eating more food or start a fast? How many people know that like before you do astrological magic, maybe you do need to dabble in some fasting, even if like the culture right now is like weird in about like detoxing or being skinny or whatever the fuck is going on in this reality right now. That won't matter because you know how to think now. And now that you know how to think, you get to choose how to think for yourself. And once you do that, you can build a relationship. And once you have a relationship, everything can blossom forth from there. So that's where like from inside of myself, that's the orientation of like how I'm trying to build the school and the information out. And it could turn into something else later, but that's like where I'm coming from with it right now.
Wow, that's really beautiful, because I think like you've learned from so many modalities that you're able to kind of like extract the essence in a way that would be very different from just like, oh, basic intro, like the basic intro thing. So if
Yeah.
you give like your fundamentals of astrology coming from that depth, what you're extracting for, yeah, you said herbologist or people who work with
Mhm.
whatever, that their fundamentals coming from that would be completely different, I imagine, than your just like
Oh my
basic
God.
ABCs of astrology.
Worlds are different. Worlds are
Worlds
different.
of
You
different.
will you literally would be becoming like, one of my teachers, Prasanti G, he says the greatest medicine is the medicine maker being made into medicine. And that's like the approach. But it also just has happened to be, it would be like based off of astrology, or the astrology would be like the focal point or the middle thing that's connecting all the things together, which might even be a little dishonest because at the end of the day, it would be based off of my relationship with like Hermetic philosophy. Really, it's like it really is just Hermetic in its origin because uh, Hermeticism would have like the alchemy, it would have the medicine, it would have the astrology, it would have the magic, it would have the theurgy, the connection to the divine. Which also to me, like when I think about theurgy, I don't think about just the connection to like the divine stars, but I also think about like ancestral work, like kind of I don't know. There's maybe a new word for that there, but just like that, all that together, like they all belong together. They always have, and so how do we bring it back in a way that can be yeah, make sense in this current space and time. Yeah, so that's what I'll be working on. There will be other teachers in the school, and so also people like the fundamentals of learning how to think about things. Because if you can learn how to think, then you also don't have to be like, this is the way this is. Because if you do that, then this over here is going to seem weird. It's like, oh my God, Cameron, you're doing all these things and I don't even get it. It doesn't even make sense. It's like, it doesn't make sense because you don't know how to think like that. You've been taught to say, this is what this is what that is. And I would say, this is that in that way. And this is how I play. And you can't even keep up with that because it's like the way that in which you've been programmed. Like that's something that I like. Yeah, I think I did struggle with when I first started teaching, but it was something that I always just continued to cultivate. And now I'm starting to figure it out. And so that's where like the idea for the school is starting to come from. And I don't even know when that's going to fully blossom forth, but I like have these like basic fundamentals, which I might end up just making it a year one for the first 5 to 10 years, which would be great for so many different people to get that foundation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think what you're bringing is really special because it's like I feel like it's the underlayer that's under everything. Does that
Yes,
even make
exactly.
sense?
Yes, exactly. Oh,
It's
100%.
I don't know what
Yeah.
that vision is, but I'm thinking
The doctrine of emanation, yeah, it would all be based off of what they call the doctrine of emanation,
yeah,
like how things come into being,
yeah.
and like if you can kind of see the schema, and also identifying that I'm like, this is the mental construct that I chose, and yeah, I do believe this, and this is how I experience reality. But if I start with saying this is the mental construct that I chose, then I can also put that aside for a moment and then see something else clearly and then pick it back up because mine makes sense because I cultivated this over such a long period of time. And I haven't seen anything or anyone say, like, oh, how does it fit into this? How does it fit into that? Right? It's like a universal translation device in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah, I feel like people get attuned, like when you share about your work, like it comes from a place where people get attuned immediately. I've experienced you in meetings sometimes where there were some tensions and stuff, and just like you set kind of a tone, and everybody, you're like a tuning fork a little bit. So you go, "Pew," and everybody's like, oh, right? But there's something
I feel
of
seen.
that, right? There's something of that kind of nature in you where you're like opening the conversation with, okay, these are universal principles and this is what we're working on, and you're setting a tone. So everybody who's like in the blah, 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 they get dropped immediately. Like it's not even part of the conversation. You're not even present for the conversation. You're still continuing on the on pitch, you know? But it's true. It's like it's
It's so accurate. Oh my gosh. I feel so seen right now. Thank you.
but it's really special. It's really special to witness. It's really special to witness because you set a tone, right? And and it just like sets the tone of the conversation and you don't deviate from it. You're like staying super centered, right? And I feel like you're drawing from so many things, but that somehow people, your clients, your students, people who are in your in your presence can kind of like find something in there that is of value to them. And
Absolutely.
so this is like something that I saw in class with you a lot, is that like all the students were like receiving something and everybody was receiving something different, you know, and kind of like finding it how it fits onto you. And so there's something, even though it's in a way super, you know, esoteric in the literal sense of the word and like hermetic in
Mhm.
that other sense of the word, like it's far-fetched and it's hard to access, like these levels of the depth of the modalities that you practice, the complexities of the mysticism and the kind of like where you go with your astrology, with the herbs, with everything. It could make it inaccessible because it's so complex and so deep and so like researched, but you manage to make it accessible to everyone who's in your presence, which is way cool, you
Yeah.
know? And it's really
Shout out to my
something that
mom
I
for that.
admire. Tell me, okay, can you tell me about her and why and why?
Yeah, yeah. She and also my teacher Norma de Jesus. So my mom would always just say, if you can't teach it to a first grader, then you don't really know it yet. Yeah. And then my teacher Norma de Jesus would say, if you don't understand each concept on the layer of each element, so earth, water, air, fire, right? So if you don't understand it how physiologically that corresponds to the emotion, how that corresponds to psychology, how it corresponds to the spirit, then you don't know it yet, Cameron. And so like those are two things that I've carried with me throughout my whole time. And so almost every single time, if I'm doing anything as introduction, I show this picture. It's like this picture of a very complex drawing, and there's all these lines in it, and there's like all these concentric circles or whatever. And then it's like one less circle, one less circle, one less, and it's like in the beginning, it's literally just like a triangle, and then it's a triangle and a circle, and then it shows how this is so complex. It's like complexity is a variety of simples, right? And so if you understand this being simple and you learn to draw this over a 2-month period, then you just go to the next one for a 2-month period. Then you go to the next one for a 2-month period. And if you do that in 2 years, you're going to be drawing this complex thing in a way that it's not really, it's it's complex, not complicated. And we can understand that, and we can, and again it's like how we think. It's like if we start there from like this is simple, then you go here, then you go here. And also the way we're learning at the foundation level, as soon as you come here and you're like, I don't understand, awesome, go back one step, and you already have this like platform to stand on, and you're all good. You don't got to go get lost in the world of thought, where you can like drop into your body and seek the information that also might be there. And so that's yeah. Thank you for saying all that. That was a really beautiful reflection. I really appreciate it, and it's so true. And I've literally spent so much time learning how to. Even you said like you did like this, right? You like put your hand, and it's like literally. I spent so much time even saying specific words where I could feel the energy move through me, and I would say, and it's like, and just go, it just goes out into the room like a direct transmission, and that transmission lands in a way that somebody is like, oh, I feel that in my body, and now I relate to it in this way. It just literally, it just like shifts based off of the reception device, let's say, right? And that's why I was saying universal translation mechanism, and I'm like, I say this thing, and everybody's like, and it like lands in them in a certain type of way. So that's really cool that you could pick that up, because a lot of times, yeah,
Yeah, no, it's a cool thing to witness. I think like I've seen you do it in different places at different times using different skills, and every time it's like a sight to behold. And I think that there's something really special about you coming up with like so much knowledge and making it really simple and accessible. And at the same time, it doesn't feel cheapened. You know what I mean? Like it doesn't feel diluted. It doesn't feel oversimplified or like you're being
right,
spoken down to because you don't know. You know what I mean? Sometimes when
exactly,
somebody has all of this experience, like they'll speak down to people, and that's like such a turn off energetically. You're like, I don't
yeah,
want to learn from you. But when,
right,
yeah, when you have these things where you're teaching and then the teaching belongs to the person, and it's like it's received, there's like it's a different thing. It's really cool. It's really cool.
totally.
So I really appreciate you for that. And so you said that's like shout out to your mom because she's like the
Yeah.
originator of that skill.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that, and also it's about how you think, not what you think. That's directly from my mom, and I know she got it somewhere else, but I got it from my mom. So like,
that's really cool. I love a mom dedication. And so I have the last question. The last question, it comes from, I took the name from this show in the 90s. Did you know? Inside the Actors Studio.
I know you took the name. Like I
Yeah, you
understand. I
don't
don't know. I don't know
you
the.
don't know
Yeah, I
the
don't.
show?
Yeah, yeah,
Okay, you're too
yeah.
young. How old are you, Cameron?
Hold on, my 34. I'm
You're
34.
34. Yeah. So
Yeah,
I back in the day, there was this guy, his name is James Lipton, and he would do these interviews with actors, and he would ask them about their process and on this movie and how did you feel, and blah, blah, blah. And it was like the best because you could have like an hour, the actor talking about their work. So I took the
Yeah.
name. And he had these classic questions that he would ask everybody, most, like classic questions that I think he took from a questionnaire from a French writer. Anyway, and the last question there is when you die and you meet God at the pearly gates, what do you hope he or she will say to you? And
Oh, we're gonna start singing. We're gonna start singing a song together. There's a
yeah,
song. There's a song there, and we sing, and then like other people come, like as if it's like out of nowhere. And so, yeah, and
it's
my
a
ancestors come, and yeah.
it's the heaven flash mob karaoke moment. Divine karaoke with Cameron and God.
Yeah, totally.
I love
Yeah.
it. I love it. So beautiful. Thank you so much for this. I think I got a
Yeah.
lot out of
Thank
you, and
you.
people are going to love it. If you want to know more about Cameron and his work, please check out his website. It's
Yeah,
cadreamplanet.com.
CA
See,
Dream Planet. But
I
yeah,
say
yeah,
care.
yeah. Totally, totally. No, it's good.
CA,
Yeah.
because for Cameron Allen, cadreamplanet.com. So, and you'll find about all his services. And if you want to know more about me, it's astroauntie.com. Thank you so much for being with us. Cameron, thank you for
Thank
accepting.
you so much. Yeah,
You're,
this was beautiful. Thank you
this
so
was
much.
great, and I'm really
Yeah,
happy that we did this together.
me too. Thank you.